what age before beauty, Swapan Dasgupta, Sandip Roy, Aakar Patel, and Ankita and Mahua Moitra. And on the screen, we are trying to get this perfect, is Pratik Sinha from Alt News.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to this session. Thanks for staying on. And Pratik, welcome to this. I'm sorry we have our backs to you, so I feel a little awkward. So we'll keep trying to turn around. But you can hear us, right? Okay, we'll start. Eventually, Pratik will join the conversation. You know, when Mala said that we would be doing this session about fake news at a literary conference, I was like, huh, really? Why? I mean, there are lots of venues to talk about fake news. Why literary conference? Then I thought, like, oh, maybe, you know, there is a point, I guess, if you think fake news is, in a way, a kind of fiction. So it does fit into a literary conference, except people who are produce fake news are probably far more successful than most of the fiction writers who are at these conferences. So it's probably not that inappropriate a fit. I had no. This was echo is. I had noticed recently that in 2017, in fact, the Collins Dictionary called fake news their word of the year. And that was because post Donald Trump, its usage had jumped some 365% or something like that. And it made me think at that time that, you know, everything is like, oh, Donald Trump did it, and now everyone's paying attention to it. But we've had our own Made in India version of it, and I went back through the last year or so just to count the different kinds of fake news stories that had been out there, and you know the variety was quite immense, like fiction. In fact, I saw stories that were about cricket. There were stories about Arundhati Roy. There was a story about a GPS chip in the rupees 2000 note. There were stories about the unpaid electricity bill of the Jama Masjid, about what Julian Assange said about Narendra Modi, and there's even fake news about the Rajkot bus stand. So this is sort of the breadth is quite stunning. So I thought I'd start with you, Ankita. In fact, since you're usually on the other side of the mic, is there, as a journalist, is there a definition or something of fake news that you could put out there and see if we can all agree on it, or is fake news entirely dependent on perception? Like one person's fake news is another person's gospel truth.
Absolutely. I think that can everyone hear me? I think that's a wonderful way to sort of set this up, really. I'll go back to that BBC article which talks about, you know, they do these 90-second, well, sort of explainers of a particular term. And they trace the origin of fake news back just about a couple of years to 2016. Of course, all of us in India know that, you know, we've been purveyors of fake news, consumers of fake news for far longer than that. But they talk about 140 news sites in Macedonia, in the Republic of Macedonia, which suddenly saw generating a lot of traffic on Facebook. And they didn't even pretend to accuracy or any sort of news reportage. These were essentially clickbait stories. These were, so they would have headlines like, the Pope has just endorsed Donald Trump as president, or find out why the intern who leaked Hillary Clinton's emails has been murdered, and so on. And so people would click on these, and this was a way of getting people to look at advertisements, generating online revenue, and so this was essentially just a way to make money. But since then, presumably, fake news there's been an absolute explosion of fake news, which seems to have a purpose that goes beyond financial gain, and I think a lot of it could be sort of for propaganda, could be for some sort of latent political purpose, one way or another. And I think we've seen perhaps the biggest proliferation of what we would call fake news websites in the run-up to the 2014 elections, and then, once the present government has been in power. And a lot of these fake news websites are certainly of a particular ideological bent, and they seem to be quoted by politicians who are aligned to the government that's in power. And of course, there may well be exceptions, but I'm just going by, what we see as being the sort of definition of fake news in this country. And it's interesting to see how those are sort of pandering to a particular ideological slant. Those in turn then get tweeted by politicians or taken up by certain sections of the mainstream media, who will then do sort of very impassioned and aggressive debates around them. And in this way, we sort of see this being perpetuated over and over again.
Well, I want to get into what happens when you sort of fake news crosses, as you would say, what do they call it, the blood-brain barrier. And so then you have mainstream media discussing a fake news story. So then how fake is fake anymore? But before that, as you said, it's been around for a while. I mean, there's the famous line from Goebbels saying you repeat a lie often enough and it becomes the truth. So this is not new. So, but Aakar, what is new about it? Would it be accurate to say that we are in the middle of a fake news epidemic, or is the story of a fake news epidemic itself biased fake news?
I think it's new in the sense that we've never had non-traditional media with a loud voice. So about 15 years ago, the only way you could reach out to even tens of thousands of people could only be through either a newspaper or through a TV station. I think today, the democratization of the media space, which is a very fine thing in many ways, has also led to the ability of an individual or a group to be able to broadcast material and make it true, at least for a temporary period. I think that's really the most important bit, because of the importance of the news cycle. We in the media will move on every 48 hours. So we have a story today, which is Mr. Modi at Davos. It'll be something else tomorrow. It'll be something else the day after that. It's important for those who want to control the narrative to be able to insert that lie or that exaggeration at that particular point. And social media now makes it possible. If you can amplify that lie, and it's not that difficult to do, it takes away the space from a legitimate reporting in a way that was not possible. So I would say it is very new.
So in a way, WhatsApp becomes as an unchecked source of news. It becomes a WhatsApp forward is trusted as much as newspapers are. But I think Pratik can hear us finally. Pratik, you can hear us?
I can
Nod if you can hear us.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. So good. I wanted to bring you into the conversation right now and ask you, since this is something you really study and deal with on a daily basis in terms of fake news, in terms of what Aakar was saying, what is new about this? What is the ecology of fake news, or the ecosystem of fake news rather? Is that something that's new and that's giving it sustenance?
Okay, to start with, I would like to answer a question which was asked previously as to what has changed. What has really changed is that in the past few years, the reach of internet has increased enormously. If you look at the data in just the past couple of years, in the month of June 2016, India as a country was using 200 million Gbps of data per month, while in the month of March 2017, that has increased to 1.3 billion Gbps. So that's like a huge increase. It's about a 6.5 times, in a span of 9 months. So that is one of the main reasons that internet, while internet is a very empowering medium, and now it is reaching the farthest corners of the country, but it is also reaching many people who take the written word on a newspaper as gospel truth. And these are the same people who are now exposed to WhatsApp, and there's absolutely no tools to verify the information that they get on WhatsApp, Facebook, etc., and which is why they fall for fake news and fall to the point that they act on it. I mean, what we saw in Jharkhand, that a WhatsApp rumor led to the lynching of 7 people and about 20 people are in jail. So basically, 30 lives of 30 people ruined purely based on a WhatsApp rumor. Uh, the ecosystem itself, the fake news can be divided into two parts. One is which has financial gain, like fake news websites. For example, the one of the most notorious ones is postcard.news. Um, uh, they have multiple Facebook pages through which they broadcast information, but more importantly, multiple ministers, members of parliaments are validating such websites. I can name at least 10 ministers from Paresh Rawal to Kiran Rijiju to Shripad Naik, Piyush Goyal, Prakash Javadekar. All of these people have tweeted from Postcard News, and these are the people who put out fake news day in and day out. And once they once they get the stamp of ministers tweeting them, a lot of people come there, they click on ads, and they make a lot of money. And there are multiple such fake news websites at this point of time. The one which is non-financial are the kind of videos that go around, like Hindu ne Muslim ko mara, Muslim ne Hindu ko mara. And these are the kind which sort of go through WhatsApp and Facebook. And most of this, I believe, is created for a motivated reason, for a political reason, to polarize the population.
Okay, so thanks for that, Pratik. Since he brought up the issue of social media, I'm going to go to you, Mahua, and ask you about, Mamata Banerjee famously said here that, we are all for Facebook, we are not for fake book. And this people saw very clearly when we had the communal violence in Boshirhat recently. There were morphed pictures from Bhojpuri movies that were then put out as on-the-ground reporting from Boshirhat. And then, like, two things here. One is it was put out saying that, look, this is what the mainstream media is afraid to report, and here we are bringing you on-the-ground story. So it was bashing the media in one hand. And then, at the other hand, taking a Bhojpuri movie, ironically, with I think who was Mano, I don't remember who was the actor, but it was a picture of a man molesting a woman, and it was passed off as what was happening in Boshirhat, and that was propagated. And then, as Pratik said, then other people, knowingly or unknowingly, it tweet that forward. So there was a crackdown here. Bhabatosh Chatterjee, I think, from Shonarpur was arrested for doing these things. So has that actually made a difference here?
Has it made a difference as what? You mean, has it stopped people from doing it?
No. Has it, like, has it put a dent in sort of the impunity that people had with passing fake news around?
I do think in the past 6 months, I would not even 6 months, I would say in the past 4 to 5 months, there has been a pushback. So I think in 2017, we had this barrage, we had this complete unchecked tide of where anybody could go out and say anything. And a lot of in fact, people like us were not unsure about what to do because it was spreading so fast. And you have to remember, WhatsApp is actually exceedingly scary, because when you have the print media, and remember there was this trust barometer which put out that 66% of Indians actually trust the media, which is far higher than in Europe or in the US or anything. So this is the print media. Even, I mean, people of my parents' generation, even till today, if it's on TV and if it's in the written press, will believe it. But WhatsApp, when it is circulating in rural areas, it happens very quickly. So when someone gets it, they just forward it without thinking about it. So how much is the onus of guilt, and how far can you prosecute these people? Are they fully aware of their own actions, or they just, is it kind of just sort of mob mentality where you're, some person is inciting you, do you put 2,000 people in jail, or do you put just the ringleaders? So it is very important to kind of differentiate who the ringleaders of these people are. So I do think in the past 4 or 5 months, with the Boshirat incident, I think that was really kind of a watershed in Bengal, where we could prove very distinctively to everyone that this was from a Bhojpuri film. And there was also this case of where you had these pictures from Gujarat, from the riots in Gujarat. 2002, which were used. So I think in that case, these two pictures, because they were so obviously fake and people rallied around, that people came to realize that all of WhatsApp is not true. So today in the rural areas, when we speak and when we have speeches, we say there is fake news and people understand it. So when people get it on WhatsApp or Facebook, I think in the past 5 months, this realization of that there could be fake news has actually increased dramatically, which is a very good thing. But I do think that you have provisions for censure and penal provisions that have to be enforced quite strongly in the months forward.
I have to say I disagree with that. Essentially, the moment you're talking about sort of enacting legislation or having punitive taking punitive steps on something like this, you immediately get into that very slippery slope of sort of censorship of a larger kind. And now you might argue that WhatsApp forwards are sort of limited to individuals within a group, within a social community, etc. But the moment you sort of bring it in for the one platform, it then gets extended to others, and then that's going to become the stick with which you beat the mainstream media, which is inconveniently calling you out.
Yeah.
Can I come back at that?
Sure.
No, I absolutely disagree, because I think if it's a crime, if I were to stand at a street corner and say something which incites communal violence, for example, the law of the land will come down on me. I will attract that particular provision of the IPC. So if I were to forward a WhatsApp, which is exactly attracting the very same provision of the IPC, that cannot be exclusive. So if I'm inciting communal hatred by word of mouth or by forwarding a WhatsApp forward, it cannot be that the law stands for one and does not stand for the other. So I do think that this is within the purview of the law.
I think there are complexities over here. What do you do when it's a WhatsApp group of, say, 2,000 people?
And I actually, let me bring Swapan Dasgupta into it. Since we're talking about this whole Boshirat thing, and Mahua brought up that picture of the 2002 riots, that was used in a poster for a Save Bengal rally. Many people forward.
It wasn't.
I saw that.
No,
it was.
You're wrong.
Okay.
What? You're just wrong. Firstly, let me tell you, what you're talking. Don't confuse rumors, misrepresentation, lies, and propaganda. These are all very, very different things. Some of these are part of politics, some of them are new innovations. Like, for instance, rumors have been an essential part of Indian society. There have been enough historical studies which have been done on rumors. Half of the 1857 uprising stemmed out of rumors. That's part of it. There's a lovely line from Satyajit Ray's Oshani Sanket, where someone says, জাপানিরা সিঙ্গাপুর নিয়ে নিয়েছে তো সিঙ্গাপুরটা কোথায় তো someone says এই তো মেদিনীপুরের পাশে now is that ignorance, is that rumor mongering, what is it? We don't know. We've seen sightings of the Loch Ness monster all over. I mean, British public life is full of it, sightings of the Loch Ness monster. In the 60s, in my childhood, there used to be sightings of Netaji.
There still are, I think.
There are.
In parts.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not getting into that. It's a very touchy issue. I don't want to get into it.
It's his birthday, especially.
Yeah, it's going to get. But in the 1960s, there were thing. Was it fake news? What was it? Now, just because the term fake news has suddenly come about, an existing phenomena used to exist. People misrepresent. Goebbels, you pointed out. Now that's complete propaganda. He used to use a certain thing. Sometimes people used to call it spin doctoring. Now that's also, would you call spin doctoring fake news? I don't know. I'm just, that's part of a normal thing.
I guess it depends on what you're spinning.
Really what I'm saying is that just because in the United States, certain people got damn hassled because Donald Trump beat all expectations and came to power. So they invented the term fake news. That Donald Trump came to power on the strength of fake news, he came to power on the strength of Russian intervention.
Well, if anything,
Now,
Donald Trump made fake news
Brexit
part
happened.
of the lexicon
Again, the
more than
establishment
anybody
was
else.
rattled. Again, they said, look, it's all fake news.
Okay, so
No, you see, the point
so, I mean,
is,
the point is
there
it's been around
there
for a
has
long
been
time.
all sorts of confusion, misrepresentation in India. Now, for example, the newspapers here said, demonetization, oh my God, this is really the worst catastrophe that has happened in India. People are dying on the streets. There are riots on the banks. There are riots outside banks. There are chips in the GPS or whatever. In the
2000 rupee
note. There's inconvenience. This is massive. It's going to blow up in the face of Mr. Modi.
That's
Now,
not
there
fake
are some
news. That's a bad
there are some
prediction.
English- there are some English channels who specialize this. Ankita knows about them also. Now, is that fake news? Now,
No.
what is it? Now, let's just get
no,
into the
would
whole
Would
thing.
you give us your
now,
definition
now,
of fake news?
therefore, the whole thing is, what you don't like is fake news. Now, there are one or two things like this misrepresentation in Boshirhat.
Yeah.
Now, those sort of things happen. This technology has enabled what is happening in Burma, and you say it's happened in Mizoram. And we know that. And it gets found out also.
So,
Just
but-
like that, there is a tool for plagiarism these days used in universities. If you plagiarize, you can get it. You can also get technology which actually
So
says this.
are you saying that
I am
this is
saying that there is a scare among the media.
about
They're
fake
bring-
news?
About their own increasing irrelevance, growing irrelevance because of social media. And hence this bogey of fake news is being put up. Yes, there
You're
is a
saying
lot
it-
of
okay,
fake
you're
news.
saying it's a
But I
bogey.
think
All
it's
right.
basically a media invention to protect the media and to enhance its own
so basically
legitimate relevance.
you're doing my initial thing, which is that the thing about fake news itself is fake news in some ways.
No,
Or
it's,
fake enough.
It's if America sneezes, India doesn't have to catch a cold.
No, I am saying America, the world is saying that, but India has done it
world
better.
is saying it.
But-
There is no concern over fake news. Yes, I'm right with Mahua when she says that, it's wrong if suddenly a Bhojpuri film is brought out and it's shown as a molestation of someone in Boshirat. But of course, but this is not to say nothing happened in Boshirat.
No, that is
completely
different.
No, that
besides the
everyone
point.
went
That's
and,
besides the
kissed
point.
each
No,
other
no.
and things
That's
in
besides
Boshirat.
the point.
Something happened in Boshirat.
That's
because
besides the point.
Because you didn't report what's happened in Boshirat, so someone manufactured it.
So, okay, so let me come to Ankita and say, since Swapan Dasgupta has put it primarily as this is a failure of mainstream media in a certain sense, I'm going to twist this around a little bit and say, there was that whole thing about that interview that Arundhati Roy apparently gives on Kashmir, right? She did not give that interview, even though what she said in there may have been not out of line with her views on Kashmir.
But she wasn't in Srinagar
She
at
wasn't
the
in
time,
Srinagar. She
and
didn't
she
give
made that
statement.
she
And it was a Pakistani fake news the website
that quoted her.
That quoted her.
And
Then-
immediately we had a BJP MP saying that she should be put
in
in front of the
truck, jeep, and paraded around.
rolled through Srinagar in that
Okay,
manner.
now I'm going to put
Now-
mainstream media on
Yes,
the spot,
all
Ankita,
right.
and say, so once that happens, so we know that the origin is a fake news story, but now the mainstream media is all debating about was Paresh Rawal right to have said that or not, and so then that becomes the mainstream news story. So then how fake is fake news anymore? Because now it's become bona fide news.
It's been mainstreamized, if
It's
I
been
can coin
mainstreamized.
if I can coin a term. But who mainstreamed it in the first place? I mean, do we not, as individuals, have a responsibility to check the sources of an information that we are then sort of propagating further? Did Mr. Rawal not sort of check whether there were multiple sources which were giving the same news about or quoting Arundhati Roy in the same manner as having said whatever it was she was imputed to have said? This is not just any person. This is a member of parliament. This is someone who has credibility. This is someone whose word is going to be believed. Surely he has a responsibility. And once he's done that, yes, it's already in the mainstream, and therefore, the media is taking it up for what it is. But bringing forward the fact that this is based on an incorrect source.
So this is what Pratik was talking about, in a way, the ecosystem that then takes this
Validates it
story and
further.
then validates and revalidates, and the person who's tweeting it. So I wanted to ask you, Pratik, in the sense, this Bhojpuri still that we were talking about was fairly quickly debunked because people knew it. But is fake news getting more sophisticated in a certain sense? So for someone like you, is it becoming harder and harder to establish that something is actually fake?
Not really. I mean, a lot of the research we do in alt news, we use regular tools available on the internet. So, it is not a question of it being harder. It's just a question that we can't reach enough people. I mean, I'll give you an example. After India lost the Champions Trophy match, India-Pakistan final, multiple videos went viral claiming Indian Muslims are celebrating Pakistan's win. Even though we put out a story the very same day, those videos were viral for 70 to 96 hours. So the problem is that, WhatsApp, it's peer-to-peer networks. It's very difficult to get into those networks. These videos keep bouncing on WhatsApp, and it's absolutely impossible to get to them and tell people that it's fake.
Yeah,
We're looking at WhatsApp and we're looking at how quickly this is disseminated in electronic media. But I was looking at the top 10 stories, top 10 fake news stories set out by TV news channels. And if you look at the top 3 stories, they're a combination. 2 of them are put out by Republic and 1 by, I think, Aaj Tak. And the first one, of course, is the infamous Jama Masjid connection, where they said that you've disconnected the power, and they didn't ask the Imam, and they didn't ask BSES. That's the first story. The second one was a story which was that Saudi men are allowed to eat their wives if they're hungry. Their wives.
No, there's a fatwa.
Right?
There's a new fatwa
that allows men to
Saudi
eat their
Arabian
wives if
country.
they're hungry. This has been put out. And the third one and the third one had Rahul Shiv Shankar on the screen reading from a conversion rate card in Kerala, which is apparently the price on the head of a Hindu woman for conversion to Islam. So if you think of all of these, now this is not a WhatsApp group. This is not a small villager sitting in a corner of Boshirhat forwarding something he may or may not understand. These are channels that are governed by sort of the Journalistic Code of Conduct 2010. You have Section 14(1) of the Press Council Act 1978. You have things in place apart from penal provisions under. Do we see, so this is not Facebook or electronic media. This is absolutely mainstream media. All of these stories have, as you can see, a very anti-Muslim line along them. They are all ideologically bent towards a certain thing. So I think that the penal provisions for something like this should be, the bar is higher. There is something, so while an MP, like Ankita says, if you're in public life, obviously the bar is higher and you have a higher standard to live up to. Similarly, mainstream television media, when they put out something like this, I mean, it is absolutely crazy that you can get away with it.
I absolutely agree with you that the mainstream media has a huge responsibility, that it is, that sections of it that are not living up to, and this is a problem. There is a crisis of credibility. And in fact, a recent BBC poll suggested that 75% of Indians who they had polled said that they couldn't really distinguish between what was fake news and what was real. And I think, that's staggering, 75%. And when you have something like that, and when you have that being reinforced by the mainstream media, I mean, this fake conversion story that you refer to is something that is at least 5 or 6 years old and has been circulating on WhatsApp forwards for a very long time. For a primetime anchor to take that up and have a 1-hour news hour discussion on that is something that absolutely needs to be called out. But I would disagree with you about enacting legislation and having the government be the arbiter of
But you have a journalistic code of conduct which you're not following. You have Section 14(1) which you're not following. So who comes in?
No, it has to.
Okay,
it has to come from within?
I'm going to bring Aakar.
Because then you go down that entire censorship
Abusive.
slippery slope,
And
and
there
you're
is
already you have politicians and you have the government using fake news as a stick to beat the mainstream media with. Every time it's something that's inconvenient, that is sort of not in line with what you would like reported, it's dismissed
become.
as fake
Uncle,
news.
if we let's just, this is where we I understand your point of view, but I think of something like this, that the law puts it down. You have the self-policing. It's not something mild like let my father self-police. He should know whether sugar is good for him. Well, if he still eats sugar, he is going to die. No one else is. That's different. In this case, if you leave self-policing up to Times Now and they put out stories which can incite something which can kill 5 people, then I'm sorry, self-policing isn't enough. The state and the government has a duty. That's the first thing. The second thing is you already have something that you've got to check the sources and check with the other side. So they should have checked their mom. They should have a disclosure. They are not following that. So surely when self-policing isn't working, at least on a technicality, they should be called out.
I'm
Yes,
going to
called
put
out for certain.
May I
Yeah,
just
yeah,
make
sure.
a small point? I mean, certainly if they are wrong factually on any detail, whether if they're factually wrong, then I think they should be held culpable for it. And if there is any responsibility on it, they should.
But that doesn't happen, no?
But let's ask ourselves another question. If there is a real story of a conversion, which is unethical in nature, if there is a real story of the Imam of Jama Masjid, who is no angel, I can assure you, doing something wrong, is it the conventional practice of the mainstream media to cover it?
Okay.
Do
so
they cover it?
I'm going to
Ask yourselves the question.
I'm going to
Do
put-
they cover it?
I'm going to
The
put-
answer
Of
is
course,
no.
why would
They
they
don't
not?
cover
Why
it
would they not?
because they anticipate. Oh
No,
no,
that's
this is too
No,
sensitive.
that's a
That
this
they
is a
don't cover
diff-
it.
this is
No,
a different
You are
debate.
paying
This
for
is
both
so
channels and do
hence
precisely
you've
that.
created the precondition why people actually bring out fake news.
Okay,
my
I'm going to
God.
get, I'm going to
That's-
I'm going to
that's
stop you guys.
completely-
And
that's
as far as I
ridiculous.
agree with Ankita that it's a very dangerous one about getting, government
Government
action. If you remember during the emergency, routinely some people called rumor mongers used to get arrested. Now, if you're going to get this rumor mongers now getting arrested, Aakar Patel will have lots of work to do.
Okay, on that, thank you for segueing me to Aakar. Aakar had, I read a column in which you had said, if you want to avoid fake news, avoid news channels, avoid social media, and subscribe to a few newspapers. I don't know if you remember having written that, but you did write that. But you look a little puzzled by it. But it's okay. This is fake news. Nothing that we say here, everything is with a pinch of salt. Imagine that some version of you said this, okay?
What I was reaching for is this, that as a beat reporter, somebody who covers the corporation or health or crime has the same job every day. She goes to the office, picks up her pen or her recorder, goes to the court, goes to the same courts every day, often for years, sometimes for decades. This reporter would pick up what it is that is coming out of that institution in the way that I would qualify as being real news. This is not afforded, this is not a luxury that is afforded to news channels for a couple of reasons, and I'm speculating here. One is that a lot of the advertising money comes out of the PCAs, which are mainly about what is called a debate. It's not about reportage. Newspapers essentially spend 95% of their space, their physical space, on news. So they do have that space. They do have that luxury to be able to. The opinion page where that I write on is only 5 or 7%. Most of a newspaper is actually news, and most of that news is filled by professionals who go out on the same beats every day, often for years. That is why I think that newspapers should be, and are for the most part, the best source of
You must
news.
be
I don't
joking,
think.
And yet
Aakar.
the
You
term
must be
paid
joking.
media. Yet the term
You
paid
think
media.
that there's no views in the news pages? I mean,
No, I'm not saying that there's not.
the news pages are essentially views these days.
Well,
No,
you could,
No,
you
but
just
let-
could
let
argue
him
that
finish.
some
Let him finish.
I mean,
some
the
newspapers are.
tabloidization of the papers has gone on.
I think the tabloid itself is a valid newspaper. I don't have a problem with a tabloid. And you might argue that there are some newspapers that have a slant, that have a bias, that put in, which is also fine with me. But I'm saying that the institution of reportage, of having people on beats, servicing those beats long enough to be qualified as being experts, fills that space is filled in mainly by the newspaper. I don't think it is filled by the TV stations. They don't have the resources to be able to do that. I don't think they have the interest to do that. Because I don't think
I disagree. I think there are enough media organizations that would have that. And also, I mean, I'd just like to point out that, you know, the word or the term paid media really came into existence after a particular newspaper which has the largest circulation in the country made it public that a lot of their space is up for hire for the highest bidder. So, you know, where do we then draw the line between newspapers who sell their editorial space and those who don't? How do
I'd
you
like
sort of...
to ask a question of Pratik. How many of the fake news bits that his website, a fantastic website, is called altnews.in, are come out of newspapers?
Pratik,
What's the question again?
how much of the fake news that you are dealing with comes out of newspapers?
Lately, quite a bit. I mean, especially Hindi newspapers, there's a lot of fake news. So it is not that newspapers are not putting out fake news. Even, you know, for example, there was this website. Basically, it was I think it's Gujarat newspaper Sandesh, which put out a news claiming that a man was hanged for farting in a mosque in Pakistan. And, you know, it was completely fake news. So these kind of things keep happening.
One must
whether it
give
is
kudos
Gujarati,
to
Hindi,
imagination
etc.
for the people doing it, though. There's some kudos should be given.
So, fake news like that, we should love it.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the problem is because fake news sounds so close to faking news, which is a satirical website here, it almost sounds innocuous, except, you know, then something like Boshirat or whatever happens, and you
Or
realize
Jharkhand,
it.
you know,
Yeah,
when
or
7 people
Jharkhand,
lost their
and you know,
lives.
people are dying because of something being put out. Pratik, but anyway, we interrupted you. Were you?
Yeah, so no, so what I was saying is that, you know, a lot of regional newspapers do put out fake news. So it is not that, you know, it is only TV channels who are doing it.
So I'm going to put it out to you guys saying that, okay, so there is, you know, some kind of fake news. Some of it might be a matter of perspective, or as Swapan Dasgupta was saying, it's there because the mainstream media is failing in its job, you know, it's not covering or biased. Leaving all that aside, if we assume that some of the stuff out there is really fake news and it is going viral because of social media, what does it say about us, number one, that we are more willing to trust a WhatsApp forward than what we are reading in the paper or watching in the news? And number two, I'll put this out there that in some ways, all of us are susceptible to fake news as long as it fits our confirmation bias. So that as long as it reiterates something we already believe, whether it's about a Rahul Gandhi or a Narendra Modi or a Mamata Banerjee, we are happy to push it out into our school WhatsApp group or whatever and help it go viral. You know, so when Pratik is trying to manfully bust one rumor, one fake news story at a time.
It's a sort of hydra-headed monster which
Yeah,
has
are
brought
we
out
missing the
more.
target? Because the issue is not that people are gullible, so gullible, or that they're too busy to fact check, but they don't really want to fact check when it comes to confirmation bias. Who wants to take it up?
I think WhatsApp and Facebook, they're all very momentary. They're all very, you get something and you push it out and you don't think about it. So I think most people, it's something if you read in a newspaper, you go and talk about it later, you debate it. WhatsApp is not a format that allows that. So you get something and you find it funny. Half the time you find, like I remember there was this fake photo of Yogi Adityanath drinking cow urine straight from the cow. And someone sent to me and for half a second I actually believed it. And I will have to say that I wanted to send it out to someone. I stopped myself from doing it.
Did, and then somebody did, and
No,
got
well, I
into a lot
almost
of
did.
trouble.
I almost did. To be fair, I almost did, and I fell prey to
Someone
exactly
without
what
a
you call.
political motive, I'm sure.
Yeah, so exactly. So but I didn't. But I mean, no, I'm absolutely open in saying when I saw that, I found it funny, and that's exactly when you say we are all human, we fall prey to that. I didn't send it out, but I did get it. So yes, for that 1 second, and then I said, oh, okay, you think about it. But yes, when it's funny, when it fits what you think it is, it's like you hear the worst humor about somebody you don't like, and you're only too happy to repeat it. That's the way human beings are. But that is very different, I would say. That's about a few of us who don't think about about it, but we are dealing with large sections of the population, say in villages 30-35%, who WhatsApp to them, they don't really understand what it is. So they believe it is gospel truth and they send it out. So I don't think that they even, they're capable, they're not discerning the way some you are discerning and yet you choose to do it, that's
I
different.
think that's an
But
important point that's been
Yeah.
raised. I just want to sort of take off from what Mahua has said. And what Pratik said earlier about the fact that internet consumption. If you look at the sort of very steep trajectory of internet consumption, you have a completely new audience now for these WhatsApp forwards, if I can call it that. You have a lot of new sort of rural users of mobile phones who are probably of smartphones, who, as Mahua says, are probably sort of taking any written word to be the gospel truth. So what happens in a situation like that when these are people who are accepting this at face value and are forwarding it as gospel truth, and that's the sort of situation which gives rise to a Jharkhand type incident where 7 people have died. So I would suggest, with some hesitation, that perhaps the government does actually have a collaborative role to play in addressing fake news in a way as to not sort of, beat up the media every time they say something that is inconvenient. But perhaps, for instance, the present government is very, very IT savvy. They have a new media monitoring cell. They have an electronic media monitoring cell, all of which have great resources dedicated to looking at the mainstream media, some 600 odd news channels, and deciding which story is positive, which story is negative, which story is neutral, and perhaps to go after. Can you imagine what it would be like if we had those same resources dedicated to, say, educating people about a particularly damaging image or WhatsApp forward, which could have extremely negative consequences? Doordarshan still has the largest reach in the country. What if you had a half-hour program dedicated on Doordarshan to actually flagging extremely dangerous stories? Is it something that would work? I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, these are all things we would put out there, but I'm going to put it out there that is there an incentive on part of politicians and all to do it
Clearly
if
not.
the fake news as being currently used is working in their favor? If it's changing the narrative in the way they want to do it. And I'll put that to you, Swapan, and it happened that anybody can fall victim to a hoax, photoshopped thing which they've sent out. When Nirmala Sitharaman did that, when she forwarded something, I remember she untweeted it, she deleted her tweet, and then she put out a tweet saying, that was an unverified thing, I don't want to do it. Many other people put stuff out there. It's pointed out that this is a Bhojpuri film, or this is the 2002 picture from Gujarat, not what is happening in Boshirat, or many things. People, and this also includes, and take name, Amit Malviya, IT head in BJP, he will put it out there and it will just stay. At most, sometimes people will delete it without acknowledging that it was wrong. So in that sense, this education that Ankita is talking about, is that utopian?
Well, I don't know exactly. I mean, let's talk about this rumor in Jharkhand, which led to it. It's not because the suggestion is that a lot of ignorant people have been given a new technological toy and they don't know what to do with it and they're impressionable. Look, we've had lynchings here. In the heart of Calcutta in the 1980s, 13 Anand Margis were lynched because there was a rumor that they were child lifters. Now, there may have been political undertones to it. There probably was. Point is, these are not something which are something unique because illiterate people, impressionable people, gullible people have been given a new toy.
But I would say it becomes easier to do it
people may
exponentially.
forward it. People don't necessarily believe everything they forward.
But they still
I get a
forward it.
lot of forwards every day from one member of this audience, and it's pretty eclectic. It's pretty eclectic.
But you
it can
forward
be
it on?
No, I don't. I don't.
If you forward it on something...
But the point which I'm trying to say is that people's political behavior is not so sort of fickle as to be decided on the strength of one WhatsApp. And I think that the fuss, the hullabaloo that is being made about it is basically a defensive reaction of the media, Because people who are in the political field will tell you, look, it doesn't matter that much. Okay, they put out WhatsApp.
I am in the political field and I do say it matters.
They put out WhatsApp, we put out our WhatsApp. Both of them, they rival each other and it's done.
Actually,
now, for example, if you were to go strictly by what the mainstream media, particularly the English language press, has to say, which are supposed to be the responsible because they understand technology, they've been tutored for many generations over it. Now, if that was indeed the case, then Mr. Modi would have lost his deposit in every single constituency in this country.
I think,
but
I
the
think
opposite
fake
happens.
news and
So
bad
their
poll
sense of
predictions
what is
are
there.
entirely
Therefore,
different things.
no, it's not. It could also be considered fake news.
No.
It could also be considered fake news.
I just
because
thought
it
we
is.
heard from him about the separate categories.
No, there
I
are
think
so.
this
It
is
could
so-
also be considered
I-
by your definition fake news. It is inaccurate.
Oh, I didn't give
it
a
is
definition.
willfully inaccurate, and you know it is inaccurate. But you do it. Why do you do it then?
I've been told we need to open it
Why
up.
do you do it?
We need to open it up
may I-
to
may I-
questions.
Therefore,
so
you
may I just also
saying
say,
something
since we
wrong
brought
is all
up-
right,
Since we
but the
brought up the
villagers saying
English
something
news networks,
wrong.
there are enough of them who are certainly not speaking truth to power anymore. They are speaking for power. There are many more of them, unfortunately, now than there are of
Oh
the
yeah,
other
that
kind.
line in the Post, which is when at the Supreme Court judgment, when he said, the press was meant to speak for the governed, not the government.
governors.
It was very quiet in my hall when I heard that. Did you want to bring in a point before I open it up to questions?
Very, very briefly, to say that lynchings have always happened in this instance, I would say is not true. I had not heard of people being murdered over beef till 3 years ago. This has been introduced deliberately in the political space by a party which believes it can benefit and perhaps has benefited from it and is okay with murder happening in the name of this policy. It is the responsibility of those individuals to make sure that any kind of rumor mongering on that count doesn't happen because the blood is on their hands.
On that note, we are going to open this up. So there's a question right in front. There's lots of hands. Let's have a microphone sent in front.
In the interest of time, I'll just confine this to social media. And I completely agree with Ankita that government regulation is absolutely no way. Because that's a very slippery slope that takes us down the path of censorship, etc., etc. What I want to say is that actually platforms like Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Google, the guidelines are very, very explicit around inciting communal violence, mass murder, and basically incitement to violence. The problem is that it's in fine print, and we don't have educated users, and people, governments, political parties, and even media take advantage of it. WhatsApp is different. It's a relatively new product. It doesn't have explicit guidelines. I would really like to, anyone on the panel can take this, rather than just saying that it's a very useful business communication. It's a fabulous tool, and it's free, and it's going to remain free. It's very important. How can we harness that? WhatsApp leadership is new in India. It's one of their biggest markets. And we can easily, actually, it's possible to go and talk to the company to frame some of these guidelines. Because if you do legislation, it's going to lead you nowhere. So I would really like to put it back to the panel.
Let me get Pratik. Let me ask Pratik, I hope you heard the question. Since you've talked about, a multi-pronged strategy to try and tackle this, how could you harness WhatsApp and nudge them in the right direction?
I don't think it is possible to use WhatsApp to, the problem with WhatsApp is that it's a peer-to-peer network. So let's say if there is a fake news which is viral in West Bengal, it'll never reach me in Gujarat. And even if I put out a story, it'll never reach that network where it is viral in Bengal. So I don't think a peer-to-peer network is the answer to this. What could be an answer is something like All India Radio. There's a fake video going on, and if All India Radio can put out a advisory saying that, so such and such fake videos going on, please be careful, then, that has the enormous reach which can sort of make a difference.
So in terms of what she was asking, you see there's not much point in, like if you had a meeting with WhatsApp's office bearers in India, is there anything you would ask from them?
Well, WhatsApp, I have exchanged emails with some, and they're starting to do some research in this area. But problem with WhatsApp is the end-to-end encryption. WhatsApp as a company itself doesn't know what is going on in WhatsApp in the sense that what data is being transferred because of end-to-end encryption. And we want that end-to-end encryption. I know that multiple people use WhatsApp to do their calls because they're afraid that their calls are being monitored and more.
So it is a double-edged sword in that sense. I think there was a question back there.
I have the mic
Yeah,
here.
where,
Over
where
here,
are you?
over here.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
What I think is the fake news exists because the real news is not available. To a certain extent, alt news tries to stop that because it tries to bring out the real news out. Now, he also put up the point that Boshirhat, those two stories happened because the actual stories were not brought out. So
what's the question?
Yeah, the question is it possible to remove censorship in any format? Because we find one channel censoring one thing and bringing up something else, maybe because of political, ideological, whatever reasons. But the censorship is there for whatever reasons, which is why fake news exists. The viability of that fake news is there because the real news is not available. Is it possible to remove censorship?
Yeah, Mahua?
No, that's a very, if you think about the question, that's actually a very dangerous question and a very dangerous line of thinking. So you're saying that for whatever reason, I may be sitting in Alipur, but I think something is happening in Boshirhat, right? What are you basing that feeling on? It's like exactly the WMD argument when Tony Blair took the UK to war. He says he's got WMD. And everyone said there was WMD, and you went in there and you attacked Iraq, and there was no WMD. So it's exactly that. He says that I am not getting proof that there is actually, I know there's rapes happening in Boshirhat. Why? Because I feel it, or I know it through some, sixth sense. But there's no real news to prove it. So if I put out some fake news, but I want to believe that it's actually happening, no one's reporting it, so I just put out a fake story, so I'm not doing anything wrong, because actually there's a secret rape happening, no one's reporting. That's dangerous. We've seen that in Iraq, right? That's exactly what's going on. So real news and real reporting has to be factual. There's a difference between what you feel and what you can prove.
But I think go ahead.
No, I think there's the gentleman there is quite right. The print media, the mainstream media, if I may call so, does exercise a certain degree of censorship, which can be also equated with ideological vetting, which does take place, which results in certain very inconvenient stories either not being covered or being brushed under the carpet. In the case of Boshirhat, I can tell you that when I wrote an article after due diligence and with due sense of responsibility about it, I was told by a newspaper in Calcutta, will you please tone it down? Will you just please obliterate some of the details? We don't do these things. Very well. I always believe in Jack Anderson's theory that it's better to lose an argument than lose a column, so I just did it. But the point is, it is precisely these sort of things. And when you talk about Facebook or WhatsApp or others being the sort of ombudsman, as it were, a guardian, as it were, a filter, then what happens is, remember what happened to the only director of Facebook who was a Trump supporter? So there's a particular ecosystem which exists even in these companies. For instance, there is, in Twitter, there is a blue tick sometimes attached to some people who get their things approved.
Yeah.
Now, till an enormous amount of pressure was put on Twitter for a very, very long, the longest possible time, Twitter used to only give blue ticks to certain types of people in the media. So I, at that time, may have had 300,000. Tavleen may have had about 250,000 followers, etc. But we didn't get till fairly late.
But you have been blue ticked now.
Now I've got blue tick.
I have to say, I don't have one yet, so I'm worried
there
now.
are people who get blue tick with 1,000 followers because they are affiliated to certain things. Now, so what I'm basically trying to say is that it's also dangerous to allow some of these companies the right to be the guardian over public morality, over public decency, political correctness, etc., because that too could be a possibility. I don't know what the answer to that is. We are confronted with new technologies, new issues, new challenges, and I think it will be some time before we can actually come to a balance. But to believe that people who've been familiar with technology for long, people who've had a greater sense of education should have the monopoly over it, and those who've just been exposed to technology should somehow be filtered out of the process. I don't think it's a correct idea.
I don't think people were saying
I think that is, there is an implicit
Nobody
suggestion
spoke
of that.
about filtering
There
out.
is a suggestion.
No, there is absolutely no suggestion either in what I said earlier or what Parma said right now. I think that's entirely misrepresenting what we said.
The one with the mic in the audience has the floor.
Yes.
Actually,
I'm having the-
yeah, go ahead.
Okay, today we are much emphasizing on the social media, WhatsApp, Facebook, Twitter. Okay, I'm referring to two news. Both are of the 60s. One, the death of Lal Bahadur Shastri, our ex-prime minister, and second, the first landing of moon of Neil Armstrong, where still it's a controversy that there is a flap of the US flag in the moon where there is no atmosphere. So how will we treat these news? Means misrepresentation or faking or fake news. So there was not, there were no social media, no WhatsApp, no Facebook. Who were controlling those news?
I mean, I think that is partly what Swapan Dasgupta was saying, that this has been happening for a long time.
Everybody loves a good conspiracy theory.
Everybody
loves it. You know,
but
I can give you many more.
But
I was told when I was young that when Sir Edmund Hillary got onto Mount Everest, actually it was Tenzing Norgay who had got on there, but Hillary pointed a gun at him and said, "You get down, I'll get in first." So you have lovely conspiracy
I
theories.
guess the point,
Haven't you
though,
heard
is
the
that
one about
that
how
is-
Jagadish Chandra Bose was deprived by Marconi of the transmitter?
No, but I guess the point is whether the US flag was fluttering without atmosphere, it didn't result in people dying as a result. You know, it becomes an entertaining conspiracy. It could, yeah, but
What about the 9/11 one? Isn't that which still is heard, which is believed by a lot of people that somehow all the Jewish people were told do not go into those towers,
and
that's given respectability. In huge number of places, it's given.
I don't know. I don't know.
Yes,
Where
yes.
I think Cantor Fitzgerald, the two of the largest brokers that we dealt with at that point, were almost predominantly Jewish. I think that wiped out 95% of Cantor's thing, who were Jewish. So I don't think I've heard the story actually.
I've heard the story,
Actually,
Mahua. You don't believe it, but because it's an incredible story, but that story does the round even now.
All right, who has the mic? I can't see in the
Government
audience.
conspiracy.
I think this lady has.
Good evening.
Yes.
It's a very vibrant session, obviously. But like a layman and a commoner, I would like to ask just a single simple question.
Go ahead.
Who do we trust?
I think
TV media, the print media? Who do I ask my children to follow
actually,
the news?
who do you trust?
Look, it's a very vague question, as you said. But the thing is, again, I have seen one of the channels going with the news that Adi Hakikat and Adi Sachai, something like that, and trying to point out that they have got this news on the WhatsApp or somewhere else, and this is fake, and trying to forward. So what I feel is, people should be educated towards this.
Which is, I think what people, thank you for that question, but I think the who do we trust goes to a larger, we've come, you know, we're not that far away from a time when all our news pretty much came from Doordarshan or state media.
Thank God for that.
So we've gone from, you know, that time when we were
But
watching
a state
it
media
and
that
also,
would never have autonomy, and
Yeah,
certain
and-
people
and
have
we
had
were-
to resign when they demanded autonomy.
and a lot
So-
of people watched that and were like, it's proper, you know, it's like endless propaganda coming from, you know, we were in a country where when Indira Gandhi is assassinated, people listening to BBC and hearing it, whereas on our own channel, the newscasters were still not announcing it. So is that part of the reason that we've gone from that distrust to, you know, this wholehearted embrace of every wacky news source that's out there is like in non-discriminatingly we have gathered it to our bosom?
You know, I'd like to try and address her question about who do we trust. It's an absolute, there is no simple answer, and I give you that. But I think if you are a discerning news watcher, reader, surely there will be a few, there'll be a few pointers that you would want to use. And, you know, our Prime Minister loves acronyms, and I think I'm going to ponderous acronyms. I'm going to use one of my own. I think you have to see which media organizations are keeping the faith. And, you know, F for fairness, are they representing multiple sides of a story? A for accountability. If they do make a mistake, and it's a very competitive media environment, we work to insane deadlines, and there will be mistakes. But having made a mistake, are you correcting your mistake? Are you setting the record straight? Are you independent? That, of course, is possibly the biggest. Yeah, it's absolutely loaded. But, you know, is there an obvious conflict of interest in the story that you're reporting? And presumably for a news reader or a news viewer, this is a lot to take in every time you're reading something. It's not even going to be possible to do all this. But is there truth? Is it accurate? You know, if your
what
facts
was the
are
R?
faith, I said. So
Oh,
F-A-R.
okay.
So T for truth and accuracy, and H for, I would say, just humanity or humaneness in the way in which you're dealing with the news. You know, are you considering the effect that a fake image or a morphed image could have in the long run? And you know, if you think a news organization, a newspaper or a television channel sort of upholds those 5 pillars, maybe we'll get somewhere. You know,
So-
I'm still an optimist.
We have to stop. Can one more question?
I've got the mic.
You?
Yeah.
You have the mic. You have the last question. Go for it.
Thank you. Good evening. My question would be that just like fake money has been laundered into the market, similarly fake news has entered the news market, if I might use that term. So how far is an ordinary citizen expected to go to, you know, trace whether the news is fake or original? How far does an ordinary citizen have to go, you know, understand that?
That's a fair point. Who wants to take it? I mean, how much should the onus be on the ordinary citizen?
A lot of the things that we face in this country have been in the news for the last 60 years. Our defense budget is 10 times what we spend on health. We have the army running large parts of the country for 50 years. AFSPA will complete 60 years in Manipur in 2018. There is no recourse to justice for a Kashmiri. No recourse. So since 1989, all the charge sheets that the Jammu and Kashmir police have sent the center, all the governments, this is not just about one government, rape, torture, murder, kidnap, the soldier can get away with anything. There is zero justice. None of this is actually a secret. It's been out in parliament every year for 60 years. I think the biggest stories are the ones that are in front of us, which we choose to look away from. I think the real scandals are not the ones that come out of fake news or some website or some WhatsApp forward. It is what we have lived through since 1947 and refuse to see. And I think that to hammer one community relentlessly in the way that we are doing, Muslims every day, day in and day out, it is a tragedy that many of us who are living through it can't bear anymore. It's awful the way that we are turning this country into something similar to our neighbors. I think that more than any small fake news here and there for me is the real problem.
Yeah, I
wonderful
couldn't agree
piece
more,
of
actually.
speech coming from the head of Amnesty International, which shows, you know, how much they believe in it. India is not such a terrible place. India is quite a decent country. India, by and large, has a sense of innate fairness, which is why we've been what we are. I think minorities in India may have problems, but they're nowhere near the problems you may have. There are problems which are confronted by people, whether they're Hindus, or they're Muslims, or they're Sikhs. And to actually categorize problems in a religious garb, to my mind, makes no sense. It's actually the point of scaremongering. It's the point you're featuring to an outside audience. And I believe that this is really the problem with some of the mainstream media, that they are looking at India through a certain tinted glasses, which is why they are so out of sync when a certain electoral result comes about. They find, oh my God, we never anticipated this. We are not in that loop. We are not in that ecosystem. So they must be hostile. So the Yogi Adityanath must be drinking urine from the cow.
You know, in Bengali you have this saying, it says, Shingher mukhe niramish bhojon. So I think I completely agree with Aakar on this. I think it has nothing to do, let's even take political ideology out of this. The question that Mr. Dasgupta sprung to answer, he is speaking from the patronizing voice of the majority. This is a question that a person in the minority should answer. So to
India,
sit as a Hindu
democracy is of the
Brahmin,
majority.
so one second, democracy is never of the majority. Democracy
goes by the majority.
Democracy is the vote of the majority, but it is for the guarantees of the minority.
But
That's what makes us different, sir. And if you
That is
understood
because
this,
it is a guarantee for every citizen.
yes, but you're
Every
not,
citizen
yes,
is equal.
but you are not
Every
the one.
citizen is equal. And
Similarly,
you are the one who's introducing a religious complexion
you
into
cannot
Did I
sit
say
here.
India is for the
You
Hindus?
cannot.
Why
You
you say
cannot sit here. I have not said that, sir. Please don't misrepresent. Everyone here has heard what each of us have said, and they will make up their minds. All I want to say is sitting here and saying that, you know, that minorities have no problem with it. This is something that exists only in the minds of amnesty or X or Y is ludicrous. This is something we're all living through, and like Aakar, I think it's territory we need to reclaim as citizens, not as Hindus and Muslims. And as long as you sit here and claim to speak on the behalf of minorities, we have a serious problem. Seriously.
That is probably going to be another debate, but I
I think it's important to point out that in
Hang
India
on.
we should believe we are Indians first, and the moment we start giving a religious complexion, as people are doing, as minorities and majorities, etc., there is a problem. There is a serious problem.
I think we are going to. No. This always happens at the end when the debate gets interesting. I'm actually going to go to Pratik because who has sort of lasted on this on the uplink. So hang on one second. Let me get to Pratik. Let me get to Pratik. Thank you. Wait. Pratik, you're getting a bit of Calcutta in vibrant action right now. So this is the tail end of our debate. Aren't you missing the fact that you're not here in person? Go ahead. I wanted to get your thoughts on that. I wanted to get your thoughts on the larger and more important issue that was being raised here right now, which it's a little bit away from the actual topic that we were talking about, but it is the reason why you do the work you do also. You're not just there because you're puncturing rumors.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I mean, the communal polarization that is happening in the country and the role news channels as TV media, newspapers, and social media is playing, that is one of the biggest reason why we started this, because we saw that it is actually doing real harm to the society.
And I think actually I understand people are very impassioned about this, but that also gives one hope that in this country that people are not apathetic to discussions like this. So I wanted to thank all of you. This is a discussion to be continued. Thank you for staying with us and bearing the Calcutta cold. And thanks for coming, and enjoy the rest of the festival. And thank you to our panel.
Thank you. You did a great job. Thank you.
Glad we warmed things up. We have an early start tomorrow with the Junior Kolkata Literary Meet. And then at 12, we have Ruskin Bond coming in. Good night. Thank you all for coming. And our main session starts here at 2 with Julia Donaldson. Thank you so much. See you tomorrow.